Let me call the Muhlenberg Township's Board of Commissioners meeting for Monday, May 19, 2025. The order, all please rise for a pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, as well, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Marcy. We did hold an executive session before tonight's meeting to discuss various personnel and legal matters. Also, for the record, Commissioner Cerulli had a conflict with work, so he will not be attending tonight for the minutes. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Wolfinger, who would like to do a presentation for us to recognize the dedication of the one and only Carol Stout for her dedication, maintaining our rail trail. So Commissioner Wolfinger.
My pleasure, thank you.
Will the residents at home see Carol?
She's got.
Okay. Good evening. Without volunteers, the Parks Department really can do half of what we normally do with all the beautiful things we do throughout the year. Volunteers are very, very important. And we're here tonight to honor a volunteer. Carol Stout, a resident of Muhlenberg, a graduate of Muhlenberg, has been with the township and volunteering for years and years. And she volunteered for Riverfest, Spring Fiesta, but I would say the thing she loves the most was volunteering on the rail trail. For 10 years that I'm aware of, Carol in the spring would be on the rail trail, cleaning out her flower beds, weed whacking, planting flowers, putting mulch, as you can see on the TV screens there. And when I say mulch, we would bring a dump truck and pile the stuff on the rail trail, and sometimes by herself, she would wheelbarrow the mulch to 3 different parts of the rail trail. So the township, in honoring Carol, put a nice bench there with a plaque that states, if I can read this here. Says this area, and it's at Hay Road and the rail trail, has an American flag Carol put up. This area is dedicated to Carol Stout for her love of the rail trail. And on behalf of the Muhlenberg Township Commissioners, our staff, and I guess more importantly, all the people who walk the trail, ride bikes on the trail, thank you for the beautiful things you've done over the last 10 years. I know things have slowed down in the last year with some of your medical issues. And I think we need some volunteers to help you out there making this beautiful again. The certificate here says, certification of appreciation for the good service presented to Carol Stout in recognition to your dedicated service in Muhlenberg Township, maintaining the rail trail and assisting at events. Award this day, the 19th day of May, 2025.
Thank you.
Carol, you can certainly say if you do that.
Well, I did it for the fun and the love of, things looking nice, but I couldn't have did it without Steve's help, Jim Bobex, and Jeremy. Because they were the ones that had a haunt when I needed 7 loads of mulch delivered. And I just enjoy doing it. It's nice to see a clean rail trail. I know I've slacked off this year due to surgery, but I hope to get to it yet. But I really enjoy it. And like I say, I lived on 10th Avenue and the rail trail was always there, sometimes with steam engines. And now, but it's good, and it's trying to keep it clean. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Carol. Congratulations again, and thanks for all your help. At this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to our solicitor, Ms. Frankowski, who's gonna run our conditional use hearing for 4030 Possible Pike.
Thanks, Mike. This is the time and place advertised for the conditional use hearing of First 61 owner LLC regarding the property located at 4030 Topsville Pike, Reading, PA, 19605 Muhlenberg Township, which is in the I2 zoning district, which is the heavy industrial district. The applicant in this case is requesting conditional use to install a substation on the property to provide continuous power to an existing industrial building on the property. Just for the public's knowledge, the procedure that we're gonna go through tonight is going to be as follows. The applicant is going to get the opportunity to present its presentation in the form of evidence and testimony. The board and township staff will then be able to will then be able to ask questions of the applicant and the applicant's witnesses if there are any questions. Members of the public may be able to ask questions of the applicant's witnesses if they become a party to the case, and I'll describe how that would occur a little bit later. And anyone who does wish to either ask questions or make public comment, please note that there is a court reporter here recording this hearing. So anyone speaking, please make sure when you speak, you say your name and your address for the record, and then speak slowly and clearly to make sure that the court reporter can get everything down that you're saying. And please avoid interrupting anyone else who may be speaking because that makes it impossible for her to do her job. For the public, I'm going to address how members of the public are able to participate in this hearing. The public will have the opportunity at the end of the hearing to make what's called public comment. That doesn't mean that you're a party to the hearing, it just means that you are able to make comments regarding the application, how you feel about the application, and address the Board of Commissioners. If anyone in the public believes that they have a direct, substantial, or immediate interest in the case, they may have the ability to join this case as a party to the proceeding. That's what's called seeking party status. If you decide to seek party status, then you have a little bit different rights than just making public comment in this case. You'll have the ability to ask questions of the applicant's witnesses. You'll have the ability to present your own testimony and evidence to the board if you wish. And you will have the right to appeal any decision made by the board if you disagree with the board's decision in this case. So first, just to make sure that we understand who may want to become a party to this case, is there anyone in the public that would like to be joined as a party?
Yes,
Okay, can you just state your name and address for the record, please?
yes, my name is Terry, last name Schultz, SCHULTZ. 3619 Willingham Avenue, Reading, PA, 19605.
Okay, and Mr. Schultz, do you own property that's adjacent to the property that is the subject of today?
Directly behind the property, yes,
And how far away would you say your property is from it?
less than 100 yards.
Okay. And I'm gonna have counsel for the applicant enter his appearance at this point because I wanna make sure that if you have any objection, we can get that on the record.
Good evening, Rob Lewis from Kaplan Stewart, representing First 61 owner LLC, the owner and applicant this evening. Given the address for Mr. Schultz, I have no objection to this party status.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. So with that, let the record reflect that Mr. Schultz is a party to this proceeding at this point. Does anyone else from the public want to become a party? Yes, ma'am?
Linda Weber,
And your address?
3615 Willingham Avenue.
And are you, is your property adjacent to the property that's the subject of tonight's hearing?
Yes,
Okay. Mr. Lewis, any objections to Ms. Weber becoming a party?
No, again, given proximity to the property, I think she meets the standard.
Thank you. With that, let the record reflect that Ms. Weber is also a party to the current proceeding. Anybody else from the public wish to become a party? All right, let the record reflect that nobody else has identified themselves as anyone wanting to become a party. The applicant's counsel has already entered their appearance, so before we get into the applicant's case, I'm just gonna go through some township exhibits. And Mr. Lewis, I don't think I gave these to you yet. Board Exhibit 1 will be the conditional use application submitted to the township by the applicant dated April 28th, 2025. Board Exhibit 2 will be the proof of publication of notice of tonight's hearing. Board Exhibit 3 will be the affidavit of posting of the notice of this hearing. Board Exhibit 4 will be the affidavit of mailing of notice of this hearing to the affected property owners. And Board Exhibit 5, which I did not produce to council or the court order, will be the township zoning ordinance. It is accessible on the township's website if anybody would like to review it. Mr. Lewis, any objections to the board's exhibits?
No objection.
Anyone who became a party, Mr. Schultz, Ms. Weber, any objection to the board's exhibits being presented?
No,
All right, let the record reflect that exhibits 1 through 5 of the board are now entered in the record. And with that, I would ask Mr. Lewis to proceed with presentation of the applicant's case.
Best for me to stand. I do have at least one direct witness. We have boards as well as I've handed the board exhibits. I'm happy to proceed as you.
Whatever makes you comfortable.
I think I'm comfortable standing, so we'll try that. If the legs give out, then I'll do something else. But good evening. As I mentioned already, Rob Lewis from Captain Stewart. I represent the applicant this evening. With me this evening is Tom Ludgate from Ludgate Engineering. We do also have a representative of the owner as well as 2 other potential witnesses, probably more to answer questions than to be on direct testimony, and they're from A1 Energy. Before the board this evening is our application for conditional use approval, which is in accordance with your adaptive reuse and redevelopment overlay district. As is my practice, I've handed to the board pre-marked exhibit packages. If the board would permit me, I'd like to identify those for the record. And in doing so, I'll provide a little bit of background summary of the application. And then at the conclusion of my introduction, I'll call Mr. Ludgate to testify to the standards in the ordinance. So first in your exhibit package, applicant's exhibit A1 is simply a copy of the deed to the property vesting title in my client as the legal owner of the property. Exhibit A2 is a copy of the application filed with the township that brings us here tonight. Then next, exhibit A3 is simply an aerial image of the property, which is accompanied by exhibit A4, which is a street view image of the property. And I'll stop there for a moment. The property that's subject to the hearing is identified as 4030 Pottsville Pike. Property is a little bit more than 14.3 acres. And as you heard from your solicitor, it's located in the I-2 heavy industrial district. The property is improved with a 270,000 square foot industrial facility that is used and occupied by Alpec Polyester. Alpec being a global manufacturer of polyester fabrics, but this facility specifically is used for plastics recycling. They are a long-term tenant and subject to a long-term lease. As you'll hear more of this evening, they have experienced ongoing power issues, as I think most of the township is aware. We are hoping to try and remedy those situations for them through this conditional use application. The property itself abuts several other industrial and commercial properties. To the west, we abut the active rail line. The next exhibit in the package is A5, and this is our zoning plan prepared by Ludgate Engineering. As noted on the zoning plan and in the application this evening, we are seeking approval for the addition of a 69 kilovolt substation to serve the existing building and hopefully remedy the power deficiencies that our tenant is experiencing. That proposed substation will be located in the northwest corner of the site. To install that substation, we're proposing to construct an approximately 83-foot by 33-foot slab. Retaining wall is necessary to bring that slab up to grade with the adjoining existing access drive. As I mentioned, that substation is necessary to remedy existing power deficiencies and instability. No other improvements are proposed with this project. We're not changing anything else about the existing conditions, nothing about access, nothing about parking, or anything of that nature. Sheet 2 of applicant's exhibit A5, the zoning plan provides additional details on the substation itself, additional dimensional measurements for the commissioners to review. Applicant's exhibit A6 is an elevation of the substation. This is just a better way to show the various components, and dimensioning, those components of the substation. As I mentioned, the property is located in the I-2 zoning district. However, the property is also within the adaptive reuse and redevelopment overlay district. We're here this evening seeking conditional use approval in accordance with that overlay district. Simply put, the adaptive reuse and redevelopment overlay district permits the Board of Commissioners by conditional use to permit deviations from the underlying area and bulk requirements in the ordinance. We're requesting 3 such deviations from you this evening. The first is to permit an increase in impervious coverage. Our site is currently non-conforming as to impervious coverage. The site is 67% impervious today, where the underlying zoning ordinance would permit 60%. The addition of the substation will increase the impervious just 0.5% to 67.5%. But because that is above and beyond what the underlying ordinance would otherwise permit, we must seek conditional use approval. The second request is permit the rear yard setback to be reduced to 14.2 feet. The substation must be located in close proximity to the existing power lines and the access road. It's really the only place other than if we were to try and put it in the front parking lot where it'd be visible from Pottsville Pike. It's the only other location viable on the site. That setback is measured to the first component of the substation itself. And again, this is a location adjacent to the rail line. The final request is to permit an accessory structure with a height of 50 feet. We've asked for this deviation really out of an abundance of caution because it was unclear in the ordinance exactly how to measure the height of a substation. The majority, as you'll see on applicant's exhibit A6, the majority of the components of the substation are well under the maximum permitted height in the I-2 district, which is 40 feet. But the receiving tower extends above that to get to the existing lines, and then there's a lightning rod on top of that as well. And by the time you get to the top of the lightning rod, you do have an antenna that sticks up to 50 feet. And in case that was to be counted as height, we asked out of an abundance of caution for that deviation as well. I'm sure the Board of Commissioners is familiar with conditional use approvals and what that means. Audiences obviously aren't typically as familiar, so I do tend to at least make one statement with respect to conditional use approval before starting. Conditional use approval is a permitted use. Conditional use approval, the applicant has the burden of establishing satisfaction of objective criteria in the ordinance. Once we do so, we are supposed to be entitled to that conditional use approval. Then you would actually shift a burden to the general criteria in your code. And under the general criteria, the burden typically lies with any opponents to a project. And it would be their burden basically to demonstrate that there is a greater adverse impact from this proposed use than would normally be anticipated from the same use. Conditional use is not a variance. Technically, although tonight I will couch it in terms of deviations from the underlying ordinance. Typically with a variance, you must establish hardship and you must meet the tests under the MPC. They're very rigorous tests. For a conditional use, it is much different. An applicant's burden is only to establish compliance with the objective criteria of the ordinance. So I just say all of that as background more than anything. It's very hard for a lot of people that don't do this day in and day out to understand the difference between a conditional use or special exception and variances. So although we are tonight talking about deviations from the underlying zoning ordinance, because they are permitted by conditional use, we're subject to that much lesser standard under the conditional use requirements from the MPC. Unless the board has any initial questions for me, I think I can jump right into having Mr. Ludgate testify. Great. Tom, so why don't you join me? So Mr. Ludgate, if you could first be sworn, I guess.
That's it.
Would you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Ludgate, can you state your name and your current business address for the record, please?
My name is Thomas Ludgate. The current address is 10 Vanguard Drive, Suite 100, Reading, PA.
And with whom are you currently employed?
Ludgate Engineering Corporation.
And how long have you been with Ludgate Engineering?
about 30 years, somewhere in there.
Okay, and are you a licensed professional in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Yes, licensed professional engineer.
And are you familiar with the property that's subject to this hearing?
Yes,
And I had identified for the board applicants exhibit A5 as a two-sheet zoning plan. Was that plan prepared by you or at your direction?
yes.
Madam Solicitor, I move for Mr. Ledgate's admission as an expert in civil engineering.
And I'm just gonna have to ask the parties that became parties to the case, does anyone have an objection to Mr. Ludgate being admitted as an expert witness?
No.
Okay, hearing no objection, and does the board have any objection?
No.
No objection from the board, so yes, Mr. Ludgate, you are admitted as an expert witness.
Great, thank you. Mr. Ledgate, I see you put up on the easel a blow up of applicant's exhibit A5. If you could, just in your own words, describe the existing property and the existing improvements, please.
The existing property, as mentioned before, is right off Route 61, between Route 61 and the railroad. It's an existing industrial building that was recently developed in the past 3 to 5 years. It has parking out in front along with a detention basin, the large building to the rear of the site, and the substation proposed at the northwest corner of the building.
Sorry, just, do you wanna maybe move that up so the board can see what you're referring to when you're pointing to
Sure. Okay, let me know where a good spot is.
Yeah, we have it.
You have, is that okay? You don't wanna?
I'd rather the party see it.
Yeah, I'll try to, this is a, if I stand here and talk, that work for everybody?
You're good.
That's fine.
So Tom, you mentioned that the proposed substation is in the northwest corner. Can you describe a little bit more in detail that proposed improvement?
Yes, I'm gonna turn to the next page, which is a blow up of that northwest corner. So on this blow up, you'll see just a corner of the existing building. And then there's an existing access drive that goes around the building. Those remain, there's no changes to the access drive or the building. And then the substation falls between the access drive and the railroad. And what's being proposed for the substation is roughly 84 feet by about 33 feet, and that would be an improved pad, essentially a gravel pad. There would be a retaining wall along that edge of pad parallel to the rail, roughly parallel to the railroad, and on that pad would be the substation apparatus. That whole 84 by 33 would be wrapped in a fence for security and provide a perimeter for that substation. And again, the access drive would be close to it, but there'd be no impact on the access drive.
And Tom, for the record, why did you choose this location on the site?
Well, this location was selected primarily because as you then travel essentially south along the railroad, the area between the building, the access drive, and the railroad becomes narrower. So this is the only place that was relatively close to the existing Med Ed lines and provided enough room for the pad, as well as the apparatus of the substation.
Tom, am I correct that you're familiar, generally speaking, with the zoning ordinance and the criteria that we're here to discuss this evening?
Yes.
So I'm going to take you through some of the criteria. First, the criteria in the adaptive reuse overlay ordinance, and then we'll get to the more general criteria after that. First, have you evaluated what, if any, additional stormwater will be generated by the proposed substation?
Yes, what I did was I looked into the approximate impervious area, roughly 4,000 square feet I was using for impervious area. Again, it'd be gravel, but we'll count it as impervious, and how that compares to the existing stormwater design of the site. I was given a copy of the stormwater design information that was part of the original building redevelopment. And if you look at that stormwater design, you'll see that the detention basin does have capacity for this additional 4,000 square feet of impervious coverage. And there's enough fall from this pad back to the detention basin to actually convey the water from the pad back to the detention basin. So the detention basin has the proper size, has about 1.5 feet of freeboard at the 100-year storm, and there is fall needed to get the water to the basin.
And so is it fair to say that it's your professional opinion that the stormwater generated by this proposed improvement can be managed on site and will be managed in accordance with the ordinance?
Yes.
Okay. Am I correct then that the applicant would accept a condition of approval if the board's inclined to grant the conditional use? That the applicant would be required to obtain any necessary stormwater permits for those improvements?
Yes.
Tom, the next criteria is that the proposed improvements will not have any adverse effects on adjacent property. In your professional opinion, will the proposed substation have any adverse impacts on the adjacent properties?
No, because what we're talking about here is something that goes in parallel to the med lines that are there today.
Tom, in addition to those criteria, which were in the adaptive reuse overlay ordinance, there are some general criteria for conditional uses in the ordinance. These are applicable to any conditional use. As you'll hear, some of these are more apt to actual uses as opposed to where we're proposing deviations. But I'll run those by you as well, Tom. And those are located in section 355-142. So Tom, the first general criteria is that the use is consistent with the township's comprehensive plan. While I understand that that doesn't necessarily apply to the specific request we have this evening, would you agree, generally speaking, that the industrial use on the site is consistent with the comprehensive plan?
Yes, the comprehensive plan calls for the future land use of this area as industrial.
And any reason to believe that the proposed substation or the request this evening would cause an alteration in our compliance with the comprehensive plan?
No, as I see, the substation is really accessory to that industrial use.
The next criteria is that the property is suitable for the use desired and that the proposed request is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies established in that specific chapter of the code. In your opinion, is the property suitable for obviously the existing industrial use, but also for the proposed substation?
Yes, again, it's industrial use. This substation supports that use.
And standing next to the other flip pages, 1 second. So Tom, the next criteria is that the minimum and maximum dimensional requirements for the proposed use within the appropriate zoning district shall be held in compliance by the applicant. Now, this is one of the criteria that are general criteria applicable to all conditional uses that I would suggest to the board, since this conditional use approval actually allows those deviations from the underlying ordinance. I would say it's not actually applicable here. But I guess, Tom, speaking generally, have you done what you can to minimize the extent of deviations from the underlying code?
Yes, I mean, you're talking about an increase of 0.5% of the impervious coverage. And the setback is against the railroad, and it's really only for those substation apparatus. It's not like a building that's gonna be 14 feet. It's a part of the substation.
Tom, the next general criteria states that the applicant shall establish by fair preponderance, credible evidence that the use intended at the location shall not be contrary to the public health, safety, morals, or public welfare. In your professional opinion, is the proposed substation and the proposed location for any reason contrary to the public health, safety, morals, or public welfare?
No, it's a substation that there's no really use to it. It's to support the industrial building. So there's no, I would say no.
Tom, the next criteria states that the applicant shall provide evidence with supporting documentation that the capacity of the road system providing access to the property or lot in question has sufficient capacity to accommodate the use, and that when the incremental increase in traffic attributable to the proposed use is superimposed upon the existing use of the road, it shall not lower the level of service of the roads or any portions thereof or any street intersections below level of service C. Tom, with the proposed substation, are we anticipating any increase in traffic for the site?
No, again, it's a substation. It'll have a maintenance aspect to it that'll be relatively minimal. So as far as an increase in traffic on the actual site, you're looking at a really an insignificant amount of traffic that'll happen just as maintenance is needed.
Tom, the next general criteria states that the applicant shall provide evidence and supporting documentation that the interior traffic circulation for the proposed use at the proposed location, including but not limited to acceleration and deceleration lanes where required at the proposed entrance to the location, shall be adequate to provide safe and convenient circulation for users of the facility, visitors to the facility, employees of the facility, and all emergency vehicles. Again, not anticipating any real increase in traffic. Do you believe that we satisfy that criteria as well?
Yes, that's satisfied. You know, all the parking and truck access and employee parking out front is not being impacted. And the access drive that will provide for vehicle access around the building is not being impacted. So yes,
So on the next general criteria, the applicant shall provide evidence and supporting documentation that the facility or use provides safe and convenient pedestrian access and internal circulation within the grounds of the facility. Are we anticipating any pedestrian traffic to be generated by this proposed substation?
no,
The next general criteria is that the applicant shall provide evidence and supporting documentation that adequate screening and buffering is provided between the lands in question and surrounding residential uses and residentially zoned districts to screen the facility from view and preclude any glare from lighting or noise being ascertainable beyond the boundaries of the property. I think you described it, but if you can you describe the proposal for screening in this facility again?
yes, so there's some existing vegetation along the railroad that will not be impacted. So the screening of the site will be just the fencing around that 84 by 33 pad site. But there's no real additional lighting proposed, there's no parking proposed, there's no parking light proposed.
And do you believe that the existing landscaping and the proposed fence are adequate screening for this type of facility?
Yes,
Tom, the next general criteria states that the applicant shall provide evidence with supporting documentation that the local fire departments have the abilities to provide adequate fire protection and emergency management services for the use. Is there any anticipated additional draw on public services such as fire and emergency management because of the substation?
well, no, the substation doesn't have any sprinklers, doesn't have a water supply, doesn't have a sanitary lateral. And on site, about 400 feet away, is an on-site fire hydrant that is fed by the building's fire pump. So there is adequate capacity.
And to the best of your knowledge, the existing building is served by sprinklers and meets current fire codes.
Yes,
The next criteria, the applicant shall provide evidence with supporting documentation that adequate water storage is available for the region for firefighting purposes. And then it provides very specific 25 pounds per square inch pressure requirements. Does the existing facility meet those requirements to the best of your knowledge?
yes, it's a new facility that meets all code. There's a fire pump on the main building, and that fire pump provides for emergency water lines and fire hydrants on either side of the building. Like I said, the closest one's about 420 feet away.
And to the best of your knowledge, this facility does not require any additional sprinklers
No.
or any other water service.
There's no occupied structure as it were.
The next criteria states where, in the opinion of the Board of Commissioners, the use of facility may require supervision and protection. The applicant shall provide evidence and supporting documentation that additional security measures will be accounted for by the owner or site manager, so the facility or use does not create a continuous burden on emergency management services and providers. I believe you addressed this twice, but the facility will be fenced for security purposes. Is that correct?
Correct.
The next criteria, the applicant shall provide evidence with supporting documentation that the existing or proposed sanitary sewage disposal facilities have sufficient capacity for the proposed use. Am I correct that the proposed substation will not generate any additional need for sanitary sewer?
Correct.
The next criteria, the applicant shall provide evidence with supporting documentation that the existing or proposed municipal water supply facilities have sufficient capacity for the proposed use. Will the proposed substation have any additional draw on public water supply?
Not for domestic.
And the final criteria in the general criteria, the applicant shall provide evidence with supporting documentation that there will be no increase in surface water runoff and erosion within the property or at the boundaries of the facility as a result of the site improvements as specified under chapter 310 subdivision and land development of the code. I think you addressed that, but why don't we address it again?
Yes, there's adequate capacity in the existing detention basin that is out towards 61. And there's fall that can allow the runoff from the pad to drain back to that basin, and the basin has capacity.
Those are all the direct questions I have for Mr. Ludgate. As I mentioned at the outset, we do have representatives from A1 Energy if there are specific questions about the substation from the board. But because of the ordinance criteria, I will rest with Mr. Ludgate at this point, but we do have additional witnesses if there are questions that Tom or I can't answer.
Question. Are you going into that station? Are you gonna paint the road?
The access road?
Yes.
No.
Why not? For the fire engine, in case you fire engine or police have to get back there.
Certainly could be paved, I'm not saying it could be paved, right now, the plan does not call for paving, but it's
How
certainly.
much does he get paid when you take a big equipment back there or cars have to get back there and get stuck in a rain or anything?
Well, I would suggest that there's a code.
From what I understand, the access road is actually grass pavers, so they are sufficient to handle the weight of those vehicles without having the impervious coverage that you would have with asphalt. So grass pavers are typically designed to handle the full weight of a fire truck or emergency vehicle without having all the stormwater generated by a full access road.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to that, Rob, that I'm sure that part of the development was that the access road around there had to meet fire code, which is like 75,000 pounds, something like that, if I remember correctly. So I would think that would have been met as part of that building development, because that's the access road for the whole rear part of the building.
Alex, do you see that? That road, is that good?
I mean, it's not maintained, it's usually pretty muddy, when it rains, you can see in the satellite imagery that it's constantly kind of, there's two tracks, it's all dirty back there. It's, we're only gonna, put an emergency vehicle back there if we absolutely have to. Sometimes it might be tough depending on if it rained recently or not, so it's kind of like a toss up if it would be problematic or not.
The, of the 50 feet, the top 26 feet. Is there any lighting there? Is there going to be any type of light that people are gonna be seeing for a distance?
There will not. It's a lightning rod, but there is nothing on top of that.
I don't, this is not my wheelhouse here, and that's why I was kind of hoping this would be in front of the zoning board. But looking at this picture here, what is this device at 26 feet high?
Why don't I have Steve come up and answer that directly? That way you have expert testimony as opposed to just mine. So Steve, can I ask you to respond to that?
Can we get a sworn in, please?
Yes.
Raise your right hand. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you state your name and address for the record, please, Steve?
Stephen Russell, the PHEN, 1222 Schuylkill Mountain Road, Schuylkill Haven, 17972.
And just for the board's knowledge, with whom are you currently employed?
I work for A1 Energy as a 1099 subcontractor.
And what is your professional background?
I am an engineer and also a master's in finance.
And
I'm sorry.
BS in electrical engineering and a master's in finance.
Steve, I previously marked as applicant's exhibit A6, the drawing that I'm showing you. Are you familiar with that drawing?
I am.
And was that prepared by you or at your direction?
It was prepared by our engineers.
And one of the commissioners has asked if you could describe generally what we're looking at here on the plan.
Yeah, so if you're looking from left to right, the first structure on the left is typically called the receiving structure. That's where Med-Ed's 69 kV transmission lines will ultimately land. So you can kind of see up at, what is that distance? Roughly 30 feet. It's denoted the incoming circuit. That's where the wires from Med-Ed that they'll bring across the railroad tracks will actually come and actually attach to the substation structure.
And there will be no necessary lighting at that height?
No, so
No sound.
no sound. No sound from the receiving structure? Right, no sound.
What about noise generated from the substation itself?
Yeah, so a substation generates noise in two different ways. There's a low frequency hum from the transformer. If you want to get folks in the community, want to get a good idea of what that's like. There's the substation that Med-Ed actually serves the building off of now. It's up on, it's called the Riverview Substation. It's up off the Topohawken, kind of like right where the railroad tracks cross. So if you go up there, if you get fairly close to the fence, you have to be within about 5, 6, 7 feet of the fence. You'll pick up like the low frequency hum that comes from the transformer. And then the other potential sound generation from a substation is if it uses fans. So often, most utility substations will kick in fans like on really hot weather days when the load on the system is high. They turn the fans on to keep the transformer cool so it actually can provide a little bit more capacity. It's really not gonna be an issue for this substation. The size of the transformer that is specified for it at 7.5 MVA, so that's 7,500 kW, exceeds the capacity of the plant now. The plant peaks at about 6,100, 6,200. So just the existing planned transformer should be plenty to meet the load of the facility. There would be fans on it, but they should never need to be used.
And Steve, you're, in preparation for tonight, we reviewed the ordinance and discussed sound levels. Is it also your opinion that to the extent that any noise is generated, given the proximity or lack of proximity to the adjoining residential, that any noise would dissipate quickly over that period of time?
Yeah, I mean, again, Riverview is a great example. It's really difficult to, if you go up there, and actually we were up there with just, it's not as accurate as a full-blown sound meter, but just a sound meter on your phone app. The general background sound level in that area is in the mid-50s in terms of decibels. And it didn't really matter like how close you were to the substation or if you were 100, 200 feet away. That's just the general sound area. And you really have to get up close to be able to distinguish the hum coming from the transformer. It's very, very low.
And Steve,
Can I ask a question? Why, since this is such a relatively new building, why wasn't this considered in the original construction and makeup of this building?
Yeah, so the original tenant or the original owners of the building was Carbon Light. And when Carbon Light was looking to take service from Med Ed, their loads projected at that time at 6,000 to 7,000 kW exceeded what Med Ed would be willing to serve off of the normal medium voltage lines that we all get service off of. So they really had just three choices. They either could go with whatever Med Ed could give them off of those lines, and that was around 2,500 kW, so like half of what their need is. And then they'd have to install their own generation to make up the difference. So that was option number one. Option number two was Med Ed could bring in lines and build a new substation specifically to serve the plant. So that was number two. And then number three is this option that you got the folks here are considering today. Carbon Light ended up going with the first option, using whatever Med Ed could give them off of the existing lines, and then installing the natural gas gensets that make up the difference.
So is this, I'm sorry, is this a reliability issue or a capacity issue?
It's actually both. So right now with this situation where they get part of their energy from Med Ed and part of the energy from the engines, Med Ed has imposed some really strict requirements on what they can and they can't do with their generation. So for instance, just as an example, if they exceed that 2,500 kW level for Med Ed, even for just a couple seconds, the main breaker at the plant opens up and they go dark, okay? So when they start to run near close to full capacity, they are getting even with the existence of their own generation, they're getting very close to that limit. So they, if there's a little bit of variance in their load, they can easily trip and basically shut the whole plant off. And then there's a procedure that they have to go through with Med Ed in order to be approved to restart. So by the time they do that, it might be 45 minutes, an hour, depending upon how fast they can get in touch with Med Ed to basically turn the plant back on.
And Steve, is an ancillary or one of the benefits of the substation, not only the reliability, the power generation, but to reduce reliance on those generators?
Yes, yeah, if this were to go through, once they were connected to the transmission system, generators will still run, but they won't need to run as much. So instead of needing three generators right now, instead of needing three generators at a time, maybe it's only one or two.
Thank you.
So this is to meet current capacity. This is not being put in the nod to growth and capacity.
Correct, and actually, there's probably someone else here that could speak, better to that point, but I believe the plant is pretty much at max capacity. I don't think there's much room left in the facility to really add much more.
And on the plan that we're looking at, just to the north of where you're proposing to put the transformer, is that where the existing generators are in that corner?
No, you have easier, yeah. So right about middle and the rear, the generators are currently located. Roughly.
They're inside.
And they're inside.
There is a.
Can I ask a question?
I do have another.
Yeah, let's let the board finish their questions and then you may ask all the questions you want, sir.
Mr. Lewis, I believe you made a comment in the very beginning of your presentation. It was kind of fleeting. You made a comment in regards to, the transformer being built in front of the building. And I don't remember exactly what the words were, something about not wanting to see it or not being able to see, you didn't want to see it from Route 61. Was consideration given to putting the transformer in front of the facility?
It's better actually for Tom to answer that question. I think there were multiple considerations. One, obviously visibility, but Tom, do you want to address again the?
Again, the Med lines that parallel the railroad are the one that feed it. They're gonna want to place it as close to those lines as they can get it, unless there's a reason you couldn't do it. Which is a kind of a spongy answer, but that's how they're gonna approach it, that if you can make it work as close to the lines, that's how you make it work.
But that's an ask, that's not an actual requirement. If you went back and said to them, and if I may approach the drawing here. Just because, some of the print on what we have is kind of small. But, so let's say to the north of the stormwater basin here, like this piece of the property here, which I don't know that there's anything sitting on. And I'm looking at the size of the pad, looks like it would fit pretty much in here. So if we were to say, go ahead and build it, but put it up in here, Med Ed doesn't come back and say, we can't do that.
I don't know what their answer would be. Typically, they like to have, they were, they're not gonna want to, typically, they're not gonna want to run a line as longer than it needs to run.
Understood. Other than a Med Ed requirement, is there any other reason that this was looked at? Like this piece of the parcel here?
Not from my view.
If I may, it's my understanding that the reason that area is mounted the way it is because there were contaminated soils on the site, and that's where they're being stored.
Out here?
Yeah, okay.
In the front.
In that portion?
Yeah, I'm not up to date on all that soil issue, but I understand there was a soil issue. So that could be another reason why it's forced back in that corner. I know most of that was out front, one specific locations, but I know most of that was out front.
Thank you.
If you have something to add.
Yeah, just the other, I think the other issue Med Ed would have is I don't think they want to be able to cross overhead over top of the Buckeye facilities.
Is the power from the substation running underground or overhead into the building?
From the substation, everything would be underground.
Okay, so there's no additional infrastructure that would be required that isn't shown on the sketch view.
Yeah,
If
the
it
only,
was overhead, you would require additional connections and there would be additional impacts to the footprint of the substation.
right, if anybody's seen the site, there's a piece of outdoor switchgear right now located off of this southeast corner, a box about 7 feet high, about 10 feet, 12 feet long, a couple feet deep. That would actually get relocated back behind the building. That's the only other piece or other structure that you'd actually see back behind the building.
The rest of my questions don't involve the electrical engineer. They're going to be based on the site and traffic and fire access to the site. Can you talk about how high is the fence that's there proposed?
We're proposing an 8-foot fence, but I mean, it would be whatever the maximum be allowed by code.
And how high is the highest point of the transformer?
It's 12 feet.
the fans would be at the top of that transformer, I assume?
Fans are actually on the backside of the transformer, the top of the fence probably would get up to the 12 feet height.
How high is the retaining wall that's proposed on the railroad side,
It varies.
around the transformer?
Around the transformer, the retaining wall is anywhere from 6 feet at its worst down to about 3 feet.
When you say from its worst, I'm looking at it from a sound attenuation perspective. My interest would be to have a wall, or my suggestion would be to have a wall of some sort built high enough to protect the sound that may or may not be emanating from the transformer. Would the applicant be opposed to a sound study being done at the houses along Willingham Drive before and after the work is completed?
We would not object to that condition, that if the board were inclined to grant the approval, we'll build the substation. But prior to doing so, we do a sound study just to check what the ambient noise levels are at our property line, and I guess on the other side of the tracks, maybe a ball field or the back of residences. And then once it's installed, if there's any kind of significant impact from the transformer, that we would accept the requirement that we'd have to mitigate that sound. We don't anticipate it, but it makes sense to make that as a condition.
How is the stormwater conveyed from the substation down to the detention pond? Is it underground or is it above ground?
Underground.
You mentioned a fire hydrant that's 400 foot away. It's probably on the northeast corner of the property. I think the fire chief discussed a bit about access to the site. If there is indeed pervious pavers installed through that area, that should be sufficient to handle the fire apparatus to access that point. One of the concerns that he has and has had in the past is that hydrant gets blocked when the fire company has shown up to deal with a fire alarm at the facility. That hydrant is regularly blocked by equipment, man lift or small trucks, that they cannot access the hydrant. So I think another condition could be putting some sort of protection around that hydrant to prevent equipment from parking too close to it.
I don't see any objection to that either.
The only other comment that I'll make, and maybe you can offer some opinion on it, if the track or the path around the building was proposed for fire access, one of the plans that you provided, actually you provide a view of the apparatus and the turning ratio, not the turning ratio, but the
Radius.
Turning radius of the apparatus, and it appears to be substantially impacted. Can you talk to that at all?
Well, as I look at it, the apparatus, the fire truck we have shown does not impact the building and or the pad site.
Plan, this version that you provided as an exhibit is different than, no, I stated correctly, it is not different. What you provide here is a bumper swing clearance of 40 foot 9 inches. And this is on the pictograph showing the fire truck and its turning radius.
Yep.
And if I'm reading the plan accurately, when I look at the turning radius that's provided after the substation is installed is 24 feet.
I'm not seeing the 24. Oh, that's just the width. It's not the radius, that's the width, that driveway is 24 feet wide.
So does this suggest that fire truck needs 40.9 feet to make that turn?
Right, but again, if you look at the two examples we have, we're overlaying that turn, that fire truck going each way, and
Look at this.
again, this is a 47-foot truck. Does not have an issue with not hitting the building, staying in 24 feet lane, and not having an impact on the pets. So that's truck going on this way, that's truck around that way. It's a 47-foot and 10-inch truck we use. Yeah, I would think the way it's set up, that during land development, that was set up for a semi truck or at least a fire truck to go around because it works. It worked without us adjusting anything, what was built. So my guess would be that this was tackled at land development.
Thank you.
I have a question about the access road itself. Did, you said these were, pavers or some type of pervious pavers?
They're impervious pavers, which are usually utilized to reduce total impervious coverage on a site while still having to meet the weight load requirements for a fire apparatus access road.
Is that road maintained during the winter, if it snows, ice? Is that clear?
I don't know whether or not there were standards in your code, the code that I typically reference. Anytime there is more than 10 inches of snow, it must be cleared, even on pervious pavers. 10 inches becomes really where it becomes a challenge for the large fire apparatus vehicles. I'm not sure if that was part of the conditions of your land development approval, but that would typically be what would apply to a fire apparatus access road. Chief, you disagree?
I would disagree from a code perspective. The International Fire Code would suggest or state that all fire apparatus roads will be maintained in operable conditions at all times for fire apparatus to maintain the building.
And again, every municipality, every fire chief, every fire marshal has a little bit different interpretation of what being maintained is. If there is an issue and you think that it requires that it be plowed and maintained at a different standard than what I referenced, I don't see that as an issue. Nobody wants to have a safety issue.
Well, that kind of goes back to the question of the fire hydrant. I mean, we shouldn't have to put in that there's a condition that the fire hydrant remains accessible. It should remain accessible now, so.
Correct.
So if that's a problem that we identified, that needs to be corrected now, regardless of the outcome of this hearing. I would want to make sure, though, that access road, if this is approved, is definitely maintained clear, so that if there were an issue, we could get a fire truck back there.
And it should be clear, it should be maintained in accordance with the land development approval. So if there is an issue from the fire chief standpoint or from a code standpoint, township has every right to make sure that that is clear and accessible, not because of this conditional use, but because of the land development approval that allowed the building to be built.
Thank you. Back to the noise, the question of noise. If we do a sound study beforehand, we do a sound study afterwards, what kind of requirements can we put in if we find that the noise is not at an acceptable level? How do we mitigate that?
And if I can just speak to that for one moment, I believe that your ordinance doesn't actually have current DBA limitations. Many ordinances prescribe specific daytime and nighttime DBA limitations. I believe that yours is couched only as a nuisance level. So I think the before study will be as important as anything else, is to understand what the current levels of ambient noise are out there at various times of the day. Because without knowing what that is, we really can't understand, one, if there is any impact, which we think, if any, will be negligible, but then what to abate, because you obviously wouldn't have an obligation to abate back below whatever those ambient noise levels are today. We're happy to work with your codes department in terms of going out and doing the study, making sure they approve of how we did the study, figuring out what it is, and then doing it afterwards. I would think that our objective and our requirement would be to abate back to what it is pre-construction. We don't foresee that as being a challenge to do that, so I think that would be appropriate.
Thank you.
All good, Commissioner. Kelsey, we're good.
Okay, anyone else from the board or township staff have any comments or questions? All right, hearing none, we'll ask Mr. Schultz to please ask the applicant's witnesses whatever questions you would like.
Okay, do I have to step up there?
Maybe it'll be easier for everyone to hear you.
I'm a resident directly behind the property, and, I've had problems with noise with the facility, since it's been built. And, I put a complaint in about the noise, and, listening to what you have to say, I don't think this particular noise is gonna create any more noise, but the generators that, which I didn't know were generators which were mid-plant in the back, that's right where my property is. And, that concerns me greatly because, somebody mentioned the decimal meter on a phone and said, well, it's not quite accurate, but you have mentioned it, and I've used two different ones, and they're over 80 decibels at times. And that's the sound that a lawnmower may make. So if you live there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you hear a lawnmower in your backyard, which is the property next door, I have a problem with that. So will this facility help reduce the noise or not?
Steve can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that our testimony this evening was that this will help reduce reliance on those generators. It won't eliminate the need for those generators entirely.
Okay.
But the frequency of their use and the number of the generators that are required will be reduced by this facility. So if anything, it will be a positive impact from a noise standpoint.
Okay, all right. And I think the point that was made about a possibility of doing a noise study, I'd love to see you do it, just to see what's going on, because the last time I was here, it was kind of like, I was kind of told, well, that's the best we're going to do, and that's not satisfactory to me. Okay.
Ms. Weber, do you have any questions for the applicant's witnesses?
Sounded like you want to do a noise study after the substation is built. And then if it's too noisy, then it's like.
I think the
Stop.
point was that they're gonna do a noise study before it's built to see what level of noise currently is generated from that area.
It's already too much. I mean, we live right there. You hear it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, nonstop. You can't enjoy your backyard because it's just nonstop noise.
Yeah, unfortunately, that land development plan has already gone through and it's built, but
Can they do something to put a retaining wall there so we don't have to hear so much?
I think that would be a question for the applicant.
There's no plan currently to mitigate the existing noise. We have an approved facility. I know that from what I've been told, I have not been involved with this project very long. There have been complaints at times about the noise, and the existing tenant has tried to address them. I think hoods were installed, different sound dampening measures were installed to try and mitigate some of that noise. But again, we do have heavy industrial permitted use in the district. What we are testifying to tonight and agreeing to tonight is this proposal will not make it any worse. We hope that it will reduce the reliance on what is the loudest portion, which is the generators, and reduce that a little bit. But it won't, but we know it won't make it worse, and we're agreeing to the study to make sure that it doesn't make it any worse.
But could you work with them, do something that's no level high, or something else to help them out?
We complain in the past and we never hear anything again. It's like they just don't care.
I know you have that right to do it.
We also get
They're
plastic
trying to help them.
floating down and landing on our property from the building.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to stick with the conditional use hearing in
Right.
front of us tonight.
And my point was, we complained about that and nobody cared about that.
Do you have any other questions?
I do. Yes. And it's a question that these gentlemen brought up. They said that the township's ordinance or its specifications don't state anything about noise levels. But it does say that the noise can extend beyond the property line. And I can't tell you what the noise level should be, but I can tell you that if your ordinance says it doesn't extend beyond the property line, their noise extends beyond the property line, whether it's 50 decibels or 80 decibels. So I'd like to make that a point of the record.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board or staff members? Comments? Okay, Mr. Lewis, do you have any other witnesses you want to present at this point?
I don't, I would simply ask that applicants that did say 1 through A6 be admitted into the record.
Okay, Mr. Schultz and Ms. Weber, do either of you have any objections to the applicant exhibits being admitted into the record?
No, but can we have a copy of it?
Yeah, I believe Mr. Lewis is gonna provide that to you right now.
Thank you.
Does the board have any objection from a legal perspective? I do not. All right, then applicants exhibits, 1 through 6 will be admitted into the record. Do you rest, Mr. Lewis?
We do.
At this point in time, does anyone from the public who has not become a party want to make any public comment regarding this application? Okay, let the record reflect, there is no one from the public wanting to make public comment. So at this point, does the board want to recess privately to deliberate and discuss the application? Do you want to meet at a later time? You do have 45 days from today's date to determine how you want to respond to this application.
Yeah, we're just gonna recess for executive session for a few minutes just to discuss, so bear with us, please. Thank you. Well, it's just for the minutes that we returned at 7:14 PM after some conversations with legal counsel. And then I'll turn it back over to, Ms. Frankowski.
All right, after deliberations in executive session regarding the application, do I hear a motion to approve the application with certain conditions that will be further outlined in the written decision that the applicant will receive?
So
Second.
Any further questions or comments from the board? All those in favor signify by saying aye. No, if any, the ayes have it, so ordered. Thank you very much, Lieutenant. Thank you, and we'll get you back. Gary, doing a 2025 annual MS4 presentation.
I promise this won't take as long as that did. If you could, fill your name and address out. I'm gonna be doing a, MS4 presentation to try to educate everyone a little bit on an exciting topic. It's definitely more exciting than that last one. Some of you may have been here last year. We do this every year. The township holds a permit, for an MS4. What MS4 really is, it's a lot of abbreviated words. There is a handout here at the corner you can follow along with that'll give you some information about it. Basically what an MS4 is it's a municipal separate storm sewer system. So it's rain comes out of the sky, gets on impervious surface, runs across your property, finds its way to the street, goes into a basin, finds its way to a creek finds its way to a river. It's kind of a short version of it, but that's basically what the storm, the MS4 storm system really is. Inside that, there's a bunch of different levels of it. So there's 6 parts to MS4. The minimum control measures, basically MCM, public education and outreach is what we're doing today. Public involvement and participation could be going out, clearing storm basins to detention ponds, cleaning or planting in them, or being, volunteers, like Steve said earlier, helping on that aspect. There's also illicit discharge detection and elimination. So if you see somebody pouring oil down a stormwater basin, or you see, could be anything, going down a storm system that is not natural rainwater, it's basically an illicit discharge. Construction site stormwater runoff control, post-construction stormwater management. You heard in the hearing, there was a little talk about that. And that's basically when you build something, it has to go somewhere in today's day and age on the way things are constructed. So there's also pollution prevention and good housekeeping. On the next page, if you're following along, there's 6 different illicit discharge things here that you could possibly look for, or they're most common ones. Basically what the township has on our MS4 permit is we have the Laurel Run Creek has sediment that we have to reduce, which goes into the Schuylkill River. And there's different ways that you can help reduce that. That we actually have to do per year as part of our permit. They want to reduce it 10% into the Schuylkill River every year. So a few ways are when there's new construction and you see the way stormwater runs, even new developments today used to run their rain leaders out to the street. That's not a thing anymore. They want you to run it across your yard so the water goes back into the ground instead of across impervious surfaces. There's other forms that they do. they're called, structural ones, vegetated swales. You'll see like some look like retention ponds, but you see really nice plants in them. Those are your vegetated swales. You'll also see stream bank restoration, which the township is currently, we got a grant to redo stream banks on the Laurel Run Creek. So we're gonna start at the Laurel Lane Park area and work our way upstream. You'll see that happen this year. So there's two, in the handout, there's two pictures showing you those. Tree planting is also can be helpful. Then there's non-structural BMP, and that's street sweeping. So you'll see our street sweeper out at just about every single day. We have to street sweep pretty much every road 7 to 8 times a year to get credit for our permit. Also, we back out those basins, so you'll see a hose that comes off the top of it. There is a picture of our actual sweeper in the handout. And so most basins are sumped, so it catches the sediment in the bottom, so it's lower than the actual pipe where the outlet goes. We'll actually vacuum that out, usually twice a year. So you're looking at roughly about 12.5 tons a year we get off the street sweeping and basin vacuum. And those are basically all our credits that we are trying to implement to get our 10% of sediment going into the river. That's about it as far as sport kind of goes. Like we could go in depth with it, but I don't want to bore you too much more about it. If there's any questions I can answer, I'll be here after the meeting. I can also answer them after the meeting. If you want to learn a little bit more. In our magazine, every quarter, we actually have an article or some sort of MS4 thing in there to learn little bits and pieces of it too. It is an unfunded mandate by the federal government. So every municipality is doing the best of their capabilities to try to eliminate this. Everybody's still kind of learning as we go, as of right now, but it is a good thing. So if there's any questions, I can answer them. If not, I can answer them after the meeting.
As far as the street cleaning, can't they let you know ahead of time when they're coming through? Because all the cars are on the street, so it doesn't get cleaned.
Yeah, so what we generally do there is in the real like Hyde Park, that's this area here where it's really tight. We'll post and then we'll flip the posting and then we'll sweep 2 days on each street. On that side, on the west side of Muhlenberg, just about all neighborhoods have driveways. So there is cars on the street, but we do it so many times a year that you will ultimately, everything will get, it's just manpower and time, and where that's why we don't necessarily post on that side. It's more the real condensed areas that we would post for. Any other questions?
One from the board? One question? Thank you, Chair. To the regular agenda of the first public portion. Anyone wish to speak on the first public portion? Seeing none? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, go right ahead, Ben. I don't know if you're signed in there.
I am. It's Michael Malone. My address is 145 Spring Valley Road. I've been a registered resident of Muhlenberg for about over 17 years, but the township's been part of my life, my whole life. In fact, my grandfather was actually served as captain when the Ambulance Association was founded in 1963. The township's just been part of my whole life. Now, I'm gonna talk about a situation here that I'm going through, but really, there's a subtext, to it about another really serious situation, that I can't really discuss publicly, but I would love to be followed up on, about it. This situation at hand is really, for the police department and, the codes inspection, departments. It's an issue with, that property that I'm living at, that has not been inspected by, since at least 2019. I know for a fact that I came here and I've asked, and when it was inspected, it says it was just paid and inspected in January 2024. It's impossible for this to happen, and in fact, at that time, I didn't have any working hot water, any working heat. There's an enormous 4-foot hole in my ceiling. There's garbage piling out in the back. There's no way this would have passed an
Are
inspection.
you a renter?
I am a renter. The people that own the property actually bought it and acquired it and finalized everything in 2020, right around when everything was going on with the pandemic. It was quite crazy and understandable, you know, things were put aside and all that. But there's been a situation where I've been going to the police. Now, recently, March 2024, there was a back and forth with a maintenance man that lives there now. And that was recent, just about the start of the year. And he came and asked about, a vehicle I had parked there in the parking lot, which is my deceased mother's vehicle that she had, given to me. And I didn't even know this guy was maintenance or anything like that. He just, started asking me about the car. Then he started asking all kinds of inappropriate questions that I just didn't feel comfortable with. So I told him, it's okay. I don't really want to answer these questions. He became confrontational. He took his glasses off, stepped to me and saying, he's getting ready to fight me. I thankfully de-escalated the situation, but I still went to the police department and I let them know. And I just wanted to really find out more about the car. I considered it done and over with. And the next morning, I let the property manager know, which at that time, I didn't know who it was because they were in the middle of changing. All I had was a phone number. But I let them know, that, about the conversation that felt really weird and awkward. They immediately sent that to the maintenance man, who came out to my door, started threatening me, screaming, physical harm, racial slurs, homophobic slurs, all kinds of real nasty stuff. I immediately called the police department. I don't know. I mean, the statutes in Title 18 are pretty clear, about harassment and stalking, and this fell under both of those because it was repetitive and he was threatening me blatantly. The officer that responded did no proper investigation whatsoever. No investigation whatsoever, despite me asking him, hey, I specifically requested these charges. And he decided to basically take the law into his own hand and decide that he is going to decide whether guilt or not, decide what the punishment is for it, which he decided was just a talking to. Since then, I have been accosted by this man almost every day. Since then, I have been harassed. My garbage is messed with, broke my garbage lid, all kinds of stuff. Just 3 weeks ago, there was no power in the entire common areas of the whole building because of illegal meter sharing. Now, I didn't know if it was mine or another person that had gotten shut off in the building recently. So I initiated an illegal meter sharing investigation with the power company. I have no idea what the status of that is. The 30 days of that is coming up soon. And nothing was fixed, but they did switch it over to their name, I guess, which doesn't resolve the meter sharing. It just turns the electric back on so nobody can tell that it's off. Really, I wouldn't be going through all this if that officer had done his job. He didn't. The officers are supposed to pass the buck to law, not be the law. That's the role. I know you guys don't like hearing it. I know policing is a difficult job. I am not here to say you guys are the bad guys. You don't do anything right. That's not what I'm doing. I'm very desperate for help in this
Well, Mr.
situation.
Rowland, we appreciate you coming to let us know. I think probably appropriate if you could, after the meeting, chief, if you guys could just touch base
I very much
about that.
appreciate that.
I don't know, do you know?
We'll run in the system and see when last rental housing inspections.
Yeah, if we have
With the records that you guys have, they're not accurate. I've come here and I've asked and I find out, it's just impossible. I can prove that when you guys said it was inspected, it was not.
It is a golf course, our officer's been out there, will legally be in there, and it will state that it's inspected, the record's not made up.
Yeah,
So
well, yeah, it's wrong, I think it's just.
I didn't mean that.
Yeah,
In that
An
way.
officer's been out, it
Lots of
wouldn't
stuff
just-
can
The sensitivity of the matter, and plus
It's
it's
extremely sensitive.
record, it's probably more convenient now that you've brought this to the board's attention. Now
Absolutely.
you meet with the chief and our director of codes after the meeting, so they can follow up and make sure, first you feel safe,
Appreciate that.
and first you're in no danger from a property maintenance perspective. So I think unless the board thinks differently, I'd rather you do that, since you let us know. And then we'll follow up with you to make sure that you're satisfied, at least we've addressed the issue, if that's fair enough.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it because, like I said, there's a subtext to another
Sure.
issue that
Yeah.
is extraordinarily serious,
Yeah.
that has basically become my life's work for the past 5 years. I mean, some of my efforts in that include through federal litigation. I've actually had changes made to the employee handbook for the United States Office of Personnel Management. This is not small. It's not a little thing. I'm going through a lot in this. And I just would really love if the commissioner could follow up with me and the code enforcement, more importantly in that other situation.
Well, Chief and Steve, if you want to go out, you can go out now if you want to talk, or everybody's let the end of the meeting, it's entirely up to you two. Yeah, if you want to just do it now, and that way they can gather the information and this board will follow up with them specifically, just so we get the details out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else sign in? All right, seeing none, I'll move on to the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve the entire consent agenda.
Very motion.
I'll second. Questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those if any, the ayes have it, so ordered. Any unfinished business? Hearing none, move on to new business. Motion to approve payment of bills as presented by the Director of Finance and Customer Service.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those if any, the ayes have it, so ordered. Motion to authorize myself to execute a deed of dedication transferring ownership of the rail trail parcels located in Laureldale Borough to Laureldale Borough.
Move. Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those if any, the ayes have it, so ordered. A motion authorized the chief of police to purchase and upfit a 2025 Ford Police Interceptor to replace a unit for a total cost of $66,889.25. So,
Second.
Kevin, this is just a replacement.
So that's the replacement.
This was for a vehicle that was totaled, earlier this year within a motor vehicle accident. So we do have some subsidies from that.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Those if any, the ayes have it, so ordered. A motion to approve sponsorship to the Center for Excellence in Local Government in the amount of $2,500.
Make a motion. Second.
Questions or comments?
I'll just make a comment. I know we talk about the CELG quite a bit at our meetings. And just, I can't say it enough. I find them to be very useful. I find the meetings that they have where we get to interact with other elected officials very useful. And they do a lot of other things. I mean, for instance, they helped when we were doing our search for the township manager and we were going through interviews. Water authority meetings. So, you know, I think support of this organization is extremely important for not only what we get in return as a township, but what they bring to all the municipalities, within and including, Parks County.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those if any, the ayes have it, so ordered. Motion to authorize Public Works Superintendent to purchase a replacement playground for Hyde Park Playground from General Recreation Inc. The amount of $172,010.
Your motion. Second.
Any questions or comments?
Okay, so we have the option, what was included in the packet was the option to install it ourselves for $105,000. Yeah, that's an option to entertain, yeah.
So a motion not to exceed that amount, is that good enough? We install it ourselves, it's less than 170. Sure, fair enough. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Noes if any. The ayes have it so ordered. A motion to authorize the township manager to apply for grant funding through the DEP Road Green Plus Watershed Restoration and Protection Program to replace the Hillcrest Avenue culvert.
Second.
Questions or comments?
This is just an expansion of the flooding projects or undertaking some of the flooding projects. The Hillcrest culvert is not sized sufficiently to handle a 100-year storm flow. So what we'll end up doing is enlarging the size of the culvert so that the water will stay in the culvert as opposed to all around the culvert.
I said that. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Noes if any. The ayes have it so ordered. Anyone on the board with any other new business? Moving on to board appointments, motion to appoint Eva Ida Brown to fill an unexpired term on the planning commission set to expire December 31st, 2027.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Please, we need a requirement for an alternate.
An alternate, that's correct.
Jim, remind me, I do have someone who expressed interest.
Okay, great.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Noes if any. The ayes have it so ordered. Bill or Diane, you want to say anything? Maybe you like some ears. No, you're good. All right. Let John go tonight, Larry. Johnny?
He's doing his work.
Yes, don't forget to vote tomorrow. All the voter, information is on our voter resource page, the website, where to vote, when to vote, all that good stuff, so.
Thank you. Jeremy?
I spoken.
You've spoken, okay, that's pretty good. Dave?
Not much to comment on. We had a busy month of April, 176 calls for service. Significantly higher than our normal average. We did have a evening of storms with probably 20 or 30 calls in just that day, so it's kind of why the elevated, the number of calls for the month.
30 verticals.
37. So we probably went over there 25 to 30 times. These calls were immediately recalled. You got medical facilities with nursing professionals, so.
Thank you, Dave.
Yep.
James?
Planning commission meeting on Wednesday. There will be no new land development business to discuss. But we will be talking about the comprehensive plan and potential revisions to ordinances at that meeting.
Thank you. Commissioner Hoffmeister, you're number one on our list.
Well, thank you. Just want to thank Carol Stout for what she does, volunteer on the trail. That's really nice for her to do that. It's nice to give her a reward like that. On May 3rd this year, they had the first memorial up there, Temple Fire Company. I didn't know they have a memorial behind that station up there in Temple. They had that since 2001. You talk to people, nobody knows it up there. That's so nice up there. And they will have it every year around May 3rd. Am I right, Alex? And that's a nice thing. Didn't have that many people, nobody knew about it. And Joey's will write something in the newsletter now, we'll put something in there. That was a nice turnout. There should be a lot more people up there, people that you know about that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Wolfinger?
I know Diane will be there, but June 14th, we have a spring. Yes, we need volunteers, whoever's watching from home. If you're interested in volunteering, call Heather or Kelly at the Parks Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lurch.
Well, I can only echo, get out the vote tomorrow. We're fortunate we live in a country where we can do this. Unfortunately, it's a year after a presidential election and voter turnout typically tanks. But, there's races for local offices and, that hits your pocketbook a lot. And, that you have more involvement, as I saw tonight, Get out the vote.
Thank you. You ever got 900 texts about getting out the vote tomorrow? You should come to my phone. Just more, quick things, Memorial Day celebration on Monday starts at 9. That's a question.
We'll post it on the web, I'm not sure, I know they're all wrapped up from the planning perspective,
Okay,
but it's all on the web.
all right,
Yeah.
thank you. The second thing is we're closed tomorrow, correct, because of election or none of the customer service open?
No, we are open. The senator's office is closed.
Okay, that's it.
State.
They can't work on election day?
Hmm?
Nothing. Also that, we're closed as a township, obviously, on Monday, Memorial Day. We also close to give our employees a chance to spend some time with their families at noon on Friday before. We've done that for years to give our employees a little break, before we start. So just wanted to remind everybody, we'll post that.
It's always posted on our doors and on our LED sign as well.
All right, thank you all. Everyone, have a wonderful evening.